Before we get started, I have an exciting announcement. We are launching a line of Head South pleasure provisions, products designed to decrease friction and enhance connection. Discover a new level of intimacy and connection with Head South's upcoming range of premium sexual wellness products, including 2 intimacy serums and a luxurious massage oil. Join our waitlist today and enjoy an exclusive 15% off on your first order. You can find the link in our show notes and head over to headsouth.world. And now let's start the episode.
Management there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Welcome to Head South Radio. I'm your host, Kat Meyer, and I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce our guest, Mariah Caudillo. A dynamic sex educator and unwavering advocate, Mariah is on a mission to foster inclusivity and equity in the realm of sexual health education. As the mastermind behind the Sex Ed Files on both TikTok and Instagram, she fearlessly imparts her expertise and responds to anonymous questions, creating a safe haven for curiosity. Mariah's firm belief is that unbiased, fact-based sexual health information is a fundamental right, irrespective of who you are. Her passion lies in dismantling the barriers that have long hindered access to this crucial knowledge. In this episode, Mariah brings her wealth of insight to illuminate the present landscape of sex education, along with its pressing challenges. Our conversation delves into the indispensability of all-embracing, comprehensive sexual education. We explore its ripple effects on individuals and society at large, while uncovering ways in which each of us can actively contribute to nurturing a world that's enlightened and unburdened by taboos. We invite you to show your support by leaving a review or rating on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback fuels our growth, and we're incredibly grateful for it. If this episode resonates with you or someone you know, don't hesitate to share it and spread the word on your social media networks. So without further ado, prepare for an enriching episode that promises to broaden horizons and foster understanding. Happy listening! Good morning.
Good morning.
And so, Mariah, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, explaining who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then we'll start to go into some questions about the work.
Yeah, that sounds great. My name is Mariah, pronouns she, her. I am a sex educator. Also, I'm a content creator now, I think. I feel like a lot of my work fits into that umbrella. I am from California, originally from the Central Valley, very small town. And now I live in Oakland, California, in the Bay Area. Yeah, that's kind of the main facts.
Cool. And so we don't know each other, and that's how I found you, was through your Instagram and TikTok, and I reached out, and I'm really excited to be interviewing you. But to get started, we're going to start with some icebreakers just to kind of warm up and get to know one another, or get to know you.
Cool. That sounds great.
What is your favorite scent?
Ooh, I really like fresh, clean scents. I also really, really like citrus. I'm a big lemon person.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess lemon and, I don't know, clean linen.
Cool. What is your favorite day of the week?
I think Thursday, because it's not quite the pressure of like, I need to get everything done on Friday before the weekend. It's like, we're nearing the end. I have a lot of momentum and also feeling productive, but it's also winding down. It's not as bad as Monday.
Thursday's the wind down. I like that. I've actually never heard anyone say that. Most people usually pick like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yep.
I actually really like Thursday because I do find that too. Like you're riding the climax of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming
exactly.
down. Yeah. Who is your number one celebrity crush?
Oh my goodness. I feel like it fluctuates so much. I don't have just one at any given moment. I think it depends on what I'm watching. Let's see. I guess Zendaya. Oh, Pedro Pascal.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yeah.
And him.
Mm-hmm.
Those two.
I think the entire country, if not the planet, is falling in love with Pedro Pascal. And it makes me so happy because I've been a fan of his for a very long time.
Yeah.
a very long time, like Buffy the Vampire,
Oh
Undressed.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I'm just discovering that. I'm a late fan.
Yeah, and like a lot of he's everywhere, and I'm just so excited for him and his career. I'm a super fan, and yeah, he's definitely on my list of crushes. Are you always early or always late?
I like to be always early. That's not always the case. I'm like I'm an older sibling. I have 6, used to have 7 siblings. I have a lot. So I feel like the being early is it's ingrained in me, so I like to be early. And I get anxiety if I'm not early, but I'm finding now that I'm like a work from home type of person, like all my work is here, it's a little bit easier to be late or like to fall into like, oh, I'll just jump on Zoom right at my time and like, yeah.
Yeah, time management's a little bit different from with work from home and like not having to like estimate for commute and A to B, kind of getting there.
Yep. So different.
I have a funny little thought though. I'm one of 7, but I'm in the middle.
Love
Yeah.
that. Big families are fun.
Big families are fun, and, like, I actually, like, really connect with people, like, whenever I hear someone say, like, "Oh, I'm one of 7, I'm one of, 6 or 8," and I'm like, "Oh, you too?" Because it's such a
Yeah.
different dynamic, and a lot of people that I'm friends with or have dated are usually, like, only children or, like, one of 2, and
Yep.
then to, like,
Yep.
come across someone, like especially nowadays, like, to have somebody who's, like, multi-family and my family's, like, hybrid, like, step siblings, but we're all siblings, like, there's no differentiation.
Yeah, same here. It's such a different, like, especially when it comes to holidays. If you have like a partner, it's a very different dynamic. If they don't come from a very big family, it's like, whoa, just a lot going on here.
Yeah, it's a lot, and I try to, like, okay, introduce some of my siblings slowly but surely so they can like, my partners can, like, get a little feel of, like, the family because like, showing up at Christmas for the first time or, like, showing up at a holiday where everybody or majority of people are, it's
Yeah,
overwhelming. I'm like, "It's like a small music festival."
it is.
Let's get started on what you do. So can you explain as a sex educator, like, who you're working with, and how did you get into sex education?
Yeah. So I feel like my career path, it's always been like in the stars or in the world for me. I feel like I was destined to kind of find my way in the sexuality field because of my childhood and the things I've experienced throughout my life. Like when I was younger, I didn't think like, oh, I want to be a sex educator because sex was not something I was allowed to talk about or think about in any other context than it's between a man and a woman for marriage and that'll be your future. So I come from a very like Christian family, a lot of Christian values, and a lot of those values intersect with like shame and guilt and staying pure. And because of that, sex was just not a thing we ever discussed in a positive light. It was never a positive thing. Like if a movie came on and there was a kissing scene, like it would be rewinded really quickly, or my dad already took it out of the of the film somehow. So it's just so off limits, which is why I think like being a sex educator now, a lot of it has to do with filling in those gaps or trying to. And yeah, I mean, good place for just like a little warning. A lot of my story has to do with sexual violence and sexual assault. So that is just, it's very tied to why I do this career and like how I got here. So the messages of like, don't have sex and then experiencing sexual assault. It's a very confusing outcome. And that's how it was for me. And especially in high school, I just like, when I think back, I'm like, oh, there could have been so many great opportunities for me in terms of getting support or kind of arriving to the like validation that that wasn't okay or like this isn't supposed to happen quicker because like I didn't know. Basically what I'm trying to say is like I didn't have sex ed in high school and like if I did, if I had a good sex educator or a good sex ed course or even just somebody to provide some sort of resource, I know like the course of my life and emotional journey would have been very, very different and a lot better. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the background of why I'm here, not necessarily like the specifics, like the what courses I took and all that, because that's like, I don't know, boring.
You're filling in the gap of resources that you needed in a time when it was like there was trauma, there was naivety. You were kind of processing that and not having the tools, the support, the resources to process it. And then you're finding it in yourself and then providing that now for people.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it always comes back to that for me, I think. And also why I think I really resonate and appreciate working with youth is because like a lot of the things I experienced, it was when I was young. So it all goes back to that and connects. So yeah, I went to college to learn about psychology. I got my bachelor's in psychology. And then after that, I mean, I've always really loved working in the nonprofit world. I've worked with a lot of youth, even in college. All my internships were kind of like in the education system, supporting teachers and young people with their homework or their family life, things like that. But a lot of the same conversations came up and they had to do with relationships, figuring out your body, reproductive health, pregnancy, like all of these themes just kept popping up even before I knew I was going to be learning about that or teaching sex ed. And because of that, I it was just a very quick progression. Like I knew somebody who was married to the person who owned the organization I worked for, and I she got me a job teaching sex ed like right after I graduated. So I quickly was thrown into learning all of this amazing stuff, getting trained to teach comprehensive sex ed. It's the state mandated version because in California we have like a mandate that comprehensive sex ed is provided once in middle school and once in high school. So that is the type of sex ed that I started with, or that was kind of where my career began.
I just want to go back because you mentioned you didn't have sex ed. Did you go to a private school or like it wasn't mandated back then?
Yeah, I don't think it was mandated back then. I went to a public school. I like vaguely remember our PE class went into like a portable one of those portable classrooms, and there was a guest who came, but it was not wasn't sex ed. I mean, of course, I have a very different like idea of what sex ed is or should be, but it also wasn't like here's your body. They just the messaging was like don't have sex. It wasn't even like here's how to do it safely. It was like don't have sex. Here's what will happen to you if you do. And they passed around pictures of STIs like on genitals. So it was just like a bunch of freshmen were all looking at pictures of like vulvas with syphilis, someone who's had syphilis for a really long time. And like it just, it was a mess with all immature people not knowing anything. So it was a very like fear based approach. And it was just one day. It wasn't even like a full unit or anything like that.
That was my next question because it sounded like, oh, that sounds like just like a talk. And I've had a few people I've interviewed and spoken to about like, what was your sex education? And a lot of people had that, like, and that's what their school considered sex ed. And it was like one person, a guest coming in, shock value of images being shown, which don't actually deter people from having sex. It might gross them out. It might make conversation for the week in the cafeteria, but it's not actually stopping people from having sex and it's not helping them have safe, healthy sexual relationships with their bodies and with their partners. So I'm curious, can you give us a little information about comprehensive? So that was a little bit of, you pretty much had abstinence education, preventative education.
Yeah.
What is the difference between abstinence education and comprehensive? Because there's not many states that actually mandate it. It might be available in certain states, but across the board in this country, in the United States, it's not the same curriculum and it varies widely. If you can just explain the difference between, we get abstinence education, but what is comprehensive?
Yeah, comprehensive. It's like the approach that kind of acknowledges that sexual development, like having a body and going through life, is just a normal and natural part of human development. It's just a natural part of life. And so, what are the tools someone would need in order to get through life, understanding, like coming to a place where they understand who they are and know how to function with the body they have and are given, or, what choices they want to make with that body. So, comprehensive sex ed is more of like a holistic approach that touches on the emotional and social aspects of growing up, of dealing with life. It's not just the where does a penis go and here's how you stop pregnancy. Those are parts of comprehensive sex ed, but it's not the only part. So it's a more holistic approach to learning about life. It's life skills. It's learning how to communicate. It's learning how to just navigate the world. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. I know there's like a more clinical definition of this is comprehensive sex ed, but I think just kind of like in my own words or perspective, it's really just acknowledging all the different parts that make us who we are, all the different parts of human sexuality, which include your gender identity, your orientation, your ability to be safe or have safer sex, your ability to make choices regarding your own reproductive and sexual health. That's comprehensive sex ed.
Yeah, I sometimes wish, like, a dream of mine would be that the school systems would add life skills, like how to be a human, because beyond just sex ed, like, sex ed should be completely a part of that curriculum, but there's so many other things that, like, leave people, like, post college, even into their adulthood, confused. I'm like, I don't know how to pay my taxes. I don't know how to, self regulate my emotions and communicate those things. And so it's like, growing as an adult, it's kind of like do it yourself,
Yeah. Figure it out.
figure it out. And it's like, well, instead of ever like it is, and I'm sure you're very much aware of this, that like sex education is a very hot button topic, very debated. But to me, it's like, well, instead of it being so focused on sex education, it should be life skills because there are life skills from preschool all the way through college. And just like math, where we learn one, two, three, and then we learn algebra, geometry, trigonometry through the course of our lifetime, what are the life skills we need? And so maybe as a preschooler, you might just need to learn how to experience your feelings and communicate them. As you get into junior high, you might need to understand the changes in puberty in your body. And then high school, whenever you start sexually exploring, that education comes into play. But it's all also incorporated with like, yeah, a 4-year-old doesn't need to know how to pay taxes. Probably, probably by the time you're 15, 16, you might have some questions because you're starting to join the workforce. And so that's kind of like my vision of instead of it being so like it's sex ed and it's this separate thing, it's like, how about life skills being added to our education system? And that's a piece of that puzzle. That's not just a chapter, but it's a continuing chapter throughout. That's my little soapbox TED talk on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I love that. It's really just yeah, it's a journey is
Yeah.
really what it is. It's not like everyone's supposed to get to this place where they're experts and they know how to do everything and they know how to have sex and know how to be safe and can prevent this and that. It's really an ongoing journey, which, I wish more people kind of saw, especially the people who are very much against comprehensive sex ed, kind of saw the need for it and how beneficial it can be even for like adults and guardians and parents of kids who are maybe receiving this type of education because it isn't just something that's supposed to happen in school for 2 hours throughout the entire year. It's continuous.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in like sex education should go until well into your 90s for yourself, but then there should be like, programs and workshops around like parenting a child, grandparenting a child, being friends with people in your life, all of those things, relational wellness. And that's part of why I created Head South, the podcast. Have these conversations because I think people need these resources.
Let's take a quick break. Hey there! Allow me to introduce you to something that has completely transformed my body, the floss. The floss isn't just a trend, it's a movement method that has reshaped the way I approach my well-being. Imagine a subscription-based platform that offers you a key to unlocking your body's potential. Fascia flossing, as it's called, doesn't just scratch the surface. It remaps the fascia network of your body. Through a tailored blend of physical manipulation, guided resistance movement, and muscle elongation techniques, it's like giving your body a personalized renovation. Since adding the floss to my daily practice in 2019, I've experienced incredible improvements across the board. My mind-body connection is stronger than ever, and let's talk about the intimate aspects. Yes, it has boosted my sexual health connection too. You can hear more about that in the episode I recorded with the founder of the floss, Bonnie Krotzer. The floss supports all of my body systems, enhances mobility, offers prevention, and provides that active recovery we all need. Curious to learn more? Head over to thefloss.com, and if you use the code HEADSOUTH, you'll receive 50% off the first month. Let's get back to the podcast.
And so my next question is, I kind of envision what's happening with sex education, like that meme with Spider-Man where he's like, there's 3 Spider-Men and they're like pointing at each other. My question to a lot of people is, who is responsible for sex education? Because there's a lot of people that are like, the government, schools, or parents, and everyone's pointing at the other. Everyone's pointing at each other, but everyone's like, I have an opinion and I want to say. But it's your responsibility. Like, parents don't want to have these conversations because they're awkward. That's how I envision what's happening with sex ed.
Yes, that's an amazing image. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I just always go back to I wish there were more opportunities for parents because I think, gosh, I don't know who the responsibility falls on. I think the schools or like the government, there's resources there. So it's helpful to create an accessible kind of learning experience in a place where young people are already going to be. There's that piece of it is like we can make this accessible and reach people. It's just kind of one stop on your journey. It's not like the only place. And parents should be talking about this, regardless if they have all the knowledge and expertise. I think people think like they have to be perfect in being a parent or having knowledge before they can engage in conversations about sex and relationships with their children or with other kids. So I don't know, like I always like to encourage parents to just all it takes is just having compassion, kind of approaching it from a judgment free kind of lens, like not reacting negatively to questions and kind of tackling it together and being honest, like, I don't actually know the answer to this. Let's figure it out. So yeah, I guess the responsibility kind of falls on everyone to just like be a kind and open person because inevitably people are going to have questions. And if you have the resources or information to share, that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think just what we were talking about, like about the life skills course, it's kind of necessary for parents to learn how to be active listeners and not react. Because that's the thing is that like they don't know, or they might approach it in a way that makes everyone feel uncomfortable. And then it's like, cool, that was awkward. Okay, bye in those conversations. But if actually people started receiving education around life skills like communication, and that was built into the education system, that by the time they were an adult and had a child, they would be able to then communicate about those questions. So that leads me to Sex Ed Files and how that started. And if you can give our listeners a little, debrief on what Sex Ed Files is.
Sure. So, Sex Ed Files is just kind of like an additional resource for sex education for, I would say, young adults and adults, just based on like how social media works. Like, I usually just say 18 plus because, like I'm talking about sex and just one. Yeah. So, it's a place where I kind of like to bring some of these conversations to an online space that can reach more people, that can, I don't know, kind of create a comfortable environment as best as I can online. It's kind of hard to do where we can talk about sex and sexuality and kind of continue that journey. It's just like, it's another resource. So I share anonymous sex ed questions that I've received throughout my years of teaching, and I kind of re-answer them for my audience. And through that, I get more questions. And so it's really I think the main thing that I do is Q&A. Like I'm answering questions, kind of doing research and providing different resources. So, yeah, that's like the bulk of it. I'm starting to kind of share more about myself, my journey, to kind of show that there's a person behind this. I don't necessarily have like a social media approach. I started it when I first started teaching, or like a year and a half into my teaching career. I started it because I was like, wow, these students are so insightful. Their curiosities are so incredible and valid. And like, I wish people knew what youth are capable of and what they want to know, and ultimately why sex education is so important. Because look, there's these amazing questions, and it's like, wow, they also really don't know anything. No one's talking to them about this. My high school courses, I'm getting questions like, what is a vulva? Do I have one? Like those are, had sex ed been a regular course when they were like in elementary school, as they're going through puberty, like they would have this information already, like no judgment, of course, but it's like sex ed is really important. And here's why. So that's why I started it. That was the motivation behind it. Initially, like I had like I have a really great group of friends, and I threw out this idea. I was like, oh, let's do this thing together. And it didn't really pan out that way. So I just share anonymous questions, share sex ed resources. And that's where it's at today. I started a TikTok a year ago with sex ed files, and I post TikToks doing the same thing, essentially just making Q&A videos, answering my followers' questions, because I opened up an anonymous question form on Google so people can send in their questions. And I answer as many as I can. I get a lot. But yeah, it's been amazing. I love Sex Ed Files.
Yeah, I love it too. And that's how I found you. And I'm a big fan of it because, and I recently saw another sex educator post this that like some people might assume, some parents might assume, my kid's not asking any questions. So they're actually not even sexually curious. And that's not necessarily the case. And that's what your work with Sex Ed Files is proving that. But it's also proving like, I think it's easy for adults or people to assume like, oh, they're getting sex ed, number one. Number two, sex is everywhere compared to when I was a teenager. Like it's literally all over the place. So they're seeing it, they're experiencing it. We had a talk. So that's another thing. Like, oh, as parents, like we had a little conversation. And then lastly, it's like they have the internet, so they can look it up. But it's also like it's overwhelming. So what I love about what you're doing is you're distilling it in the format in which kids are consuming things and the way that they like to consume it, which is on TikTok and on Instagram. And it's quick and relatable. And you make it such a safe space that's not shame. So I wanted to read some of the questions because
Yeah.
I love them. And I also, some of them I'm like, wow, I'm nearly 40 and I want to know that too. Like, I never thought of that. So I love that too. I love reading some of their questions because I'm like, that's never even crossed my mind. Like, wait, yeah, I don't know the answer. So I just wanted to read. So you don't have to answer all these. I wanted to read some, and then I wanted to pull like one or two that I was like, tell me what. So your anonymous questions, and I love that you put they're from the index cards. They're from years of like your career. So it's not anything recent that's like putting any students on the spot. But I also think it just opens up this opportunity for people to feel safe to add to your Google Doc and get their questions answered. And so some of them are, is it true that you have to pop the cherry? What's a queef and is it related to queer? Why do people anally bleach themselves? Does the grapefruit method help oral sex? Why are testicles delicate? Is it okay if you hang out with your boyfriend 24/7 at school? What does semen taste like? Is sex different when a girl is on her period? And how do you get rid of a boner fast? Is it weird to jizz every day? So the one that caught my eye was, does the grapefruit method help oral sex? Because I don't know what that is.
The grapefruit method. That's so funny because like I was thinking, because I have a grapefruit in my fridge right now. I was like, oh, I should make a video about this today, which is so funny. The grapefruit method, I think it gained popularity because of the movie Girls Trip. I think Girls Trip. I think it's Tiffany Haddish's character uses a grapefruit for oral sex. Like, so the method is, I think there are two different methods because a person can use it on themselves or use it during oral sex. So you basically cut a grapefruit in half, I believe. Don't quote me. I'm not an expert on the grapefruit method, I will say. But you basically put it around the penis and you use that, you like move it up and down during oral sex. So it's like it adds an additional texture, but also, that element of like different tastes and kind of fun during oral sex. So that's what it is. And then there's also the grapefruit method for masturbation, or a person could, usually a person would need to put a condom on because citrus it can hurt. It's not like ideal for sensitive skin or like getting into the urethra of a penis, like that can sting. So it's always a good idea to use a condom with any sort of food.
Food play, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like a person can essentially do the same thing to themselves, is like use the grapefruit as they're masturbating.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. I didn't see that film. I love that this episode is all about fruit, lemons, and grape.
True. Yep.
um, and then another one was, is it different when a girl is on her period? So I know the answer to that, but I would love for you to explain that one.
Yeah, sure. And this is a really common question I get. I think a lot of people are like, "Well, but am I allowed to have sex on my period? Is it dangerous?" That's usually like the reasoning behind people asking it. They're thinking it's like really scary or dangerous. So ultimately, with any sort of sexual activity, whether someone's on their period or not, it's a personal decision. It's dependent on people involved and what people's boundaries are. Anytime I answer a question, that's always the best place for me to start, is just kind of acknowledging the choice in everything you do with your body and being able to kind of evaluate, okay, what are my boundaries here? What do I want? And then what are my partners? What do they want? And how can we decide on something together? So, but ultimately, like having sex on your period isn't dangerous in terms of like you having a period. In fact, there can be some benefits for some people. Having sex on their period can alleviate cramps because of all the endorphins, and it's kind of like a natural pain reliever, which is why a lot of people might say like masturbation during your period is really, really nice or really helpful. So yeah, I kind of like describe that there are benefits if you want to. There's nothing like wrong about it. There are still like the same risks that are there for sex without being on your period. Those same risks exist. So, if you'd like to consider having safer sex, that's always, there's nothing wrong with that. It's always a great idea to
Mhm.
think about all of your options, because when fluids are involved, I might share like the mess of it all. So, like how to kind of keep things contained, maybe using a towel. So, like the blood doesn't get everywhere. But yeah. And then, I mean, like I always like to acknowledge that some people don't like to have sex on their period, and they don't have to. Not everyone's comfortable with like blood and all of that. So,
Mhm.
they may not want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, with sex and pleasure, it's a spectrum, and where people are comfortable with their experience, so exactly that what you said of, like, sharing and communicating about it. I would say that with period sex, I think some people think, "Oh, we'll just have it in the shower," which is a good option. I would recommend, especially any sex on periods, it's not the same fluid as the natural lubricant that produces when from your body if you're a vagina vulva owner, and so it's not the same lubrication, and so just being mindful of maybe having additional tools of lubrication with you because it can cause, in my own experience, it's caused irritation and unknowing, or like being in the shower, it's not the same lubrication. Water is not the same lubrication, so it can cause friction even though there's fluidity there, and so just being mindful of that because it's been my own experience where that's happened.
Totally. That's really good advice.
And then to start wrapping up, in a perfect world, what would sex education look like for you? If there was not knowing this world, we're on a different planet, what does the perfect sex education look like?
I think the perfect sex education would be something that is inclusive. I think to start, it's inclusive of all identities and experiences, something that addresses those things. Sex ed that's like culturally responsive, that understands that a person's personal experience, their race, their culture, their religion, all of these really big things related to identity and intersectionality play a role in how you view sex and how you understand your own body and relationships, and how can we address those things and also respect those things in sex education. I think that kind of goes back to this like holistic approach of addressing the emotional, social, and relational aspects of human sexuality, because inevitably all of that is related back to every individual. Also, in a perfect world, sex ed that is like trauma informed, that, understands at the same time, like, there are ways to make people feel safe and comfortable. There are tools you can implement in a classroom to make sure everyone feels good about the information they're receiving, or as best as they can. Like, not everyone is going to feel good about it, not everyone's going to like it, but how can people feel as comfortable as they can? So, a lot of people implement different tools. They're like the standard things of like having group agreements, doing those things together. A lot of things I like to do is kind of provide different options in terms of like different modes of learning. So like saying like, if you don't want to listen, you don't have to. Like, if it's normal for you in this classroom to put your headphones on and your teacher's okay with that, do that. If you want to color, I have notebooks, you can color while you learn. Like, just providing options versus coming into a classroom and saying everyone has to listen and sit here and engage in this conversation. That's not trauma informed, because some people may be just coming to school from an abusive environment. That's not where their head is right now. And it's not safe for them to talk about sex or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think sex ed that's trauma informed would be in my ideal world. Sex ed that's empowering, affirmative, something that just reminds people that they are in charge of their bodies and lives.
Autonomy.
Autonomy, thank you. Bodily autonomy. Sex ed that really allows for there to be a continued support system somehow, continued access to resources. Because I think what happens, especially with school-based sex ed, sex educator goes in there after the health unit or however it's designed, they leave and that's it. And it's like, now what? What if I have questions? So it would be really cool if we could have some sort of ongoing support system, whether that be a text system or a website, or a lot of I worked with a lot of different organizations, and we do have a lot of those things in place. But I think it's super valuable, especially like for parents or other teachers, to kind of have that support too, so that this sex ed journey and life cycle can continue and people feel supported.
Hmm. Yeah, ongoing education is so important. I love what you said about the crayons thing because I just had this conversation with someone that I work with who was explaining that, like, when they were in school, they would get in trouble a lot for doodling during certain classes. And providing that for people who learn differently. Not everyone's audible, not everyone's visual. Some people are both. Everyone learns differently. So I think that, and especially so not just trauma informed, and I love that, having like resources and techniques to kind of support people who might not be able to fully engage with the conversation for any sensitivities, but also certain types of learning you might need to doodle or stimulate your fingers or do anything that kind of helps you process the information differently. And so I love that you mentioned that because I think a lot of curriculum, and especially sex ed, is able bodied and also excludes anyone who doesn't fit the normative. And for people who learn differently, who are neurodivergent, who have disabilities or things like that, they're not a part of the conversation. And also then they get labeled as asexual. And that's not the case. And so I think that with your like inclusivity of religion, race, social background, like all of those things, those factors, but also including people who might be considered more of the margin. and allowing them to be a part of the conversation wherever they feel safe being in the conversation, like letting them choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like even when I talk about sex ed needs to be inclusive, that means the people writing sex ed, the people who are behind creating the activities and curriculum need to be part of the conversation. I always like to say like sex ed for youth by youth. I would love to see youth being able to say, this is what I want to learn, and this is how you should do it. I think that approach is so important because a lot of people learn best from people who get them, who understand them, which is why, like, we need people with disabilities writing curriculum so that students with disabilities feel seen, totally understood, and know, like, oh, this is for me, and I'm a part of this too. That's how sex ed should be. That's how all education should be, truly.
Representation, relatability, and also, yeah, relatability from like, even if that's not your body, like just from the binary gendered versions of sex ed, it's like, why can't we include all of the genders, but all of the experiences too? Everything, like all when we're talking inclusivity, it's everyone is represented and they can see themselves and also then understand what the experience is like for everybody else. Don't separate by gender and put people in certain rooms. I always felt that way, like, I wish I knew what was going on in the boys' room with that VHS video. Yeah, how do you get rid of a boner fast? Like, is it okay to jizz every day? I don't even know what that feels like, but, like, I would have liked to have understood that and known what was going on with my classmates at the time. And so I think, like, creating curriculum that includes everybody, but then everybody witnesses it so you understand where people are coming from around you. It's peer supported. I love that and it's also, crowdsourced.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm. That is the ideal sex ed. That would be a beautiful experience,
Yeah.
truly.
Mhm. I'm like, I have goosebumps now because 'cause I'm like, "Yeah, that's the sex that I want." Like, I want that for myself.
Right. Me
Yeah.
too. Me too.
Okay, Mariah, so that's it. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I could talk to you all weekend about all of this stuff, and I so appreciate you taking the time to be on Head South Radio, and if there's anything like, how do people find you?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok. Those are my main platforms. Sex Ed Files. Don't yet have a website. Hopefully, I will soon. I'm doing a photo shoot this weekend. So
Cool.
I'm like starting to, I don't know. Sex Ed Files isn't a business. It was never like, it's more of just a passion project. But I think in this world of like social media, it's nice to have a place where people can access you a little bit easier and kind of see your work. So I'm working on that stuff now. So just the socials for now.
Cool. Yeah, and that's once you establish those things, that's how they'll find you is through your social channels and
Yep.
then point them in that direction. But congratulations on that. That's a really big step and a move that I think is needed. I think we need more sex educators like yourself. So thank you.
Thank you.
Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.
If you're looking for